Welcome to Chestnut Street Cemetery, located in historic downtown Apalachicola. Today we're going to go on a tour of Episode 3 and meet some of the founding fathers of our great city. So come with me as we tiptoe through the tombstones and learn about our heritage. This is the monument of Anson Hancock. Anson Hancock was a native of North Carolina and moved to Apalachicola in the 1830s. He died January the 12th, 1865. He built the first hotel in Apalachicola and ran it. He was the innkeeper. The hotel eventually became the Fuller Hotel, which today is the location of the Superior Bank on 4th Street and Avenue D. Anson was instrumental in helping plat the city of Apalachicola. He was good friends with Dr. Gorey and Dr. Chapman. He and his wife Susan had twin daughters, which they lost in infancy. The graves are here. They were Savannah and Florida. This is the monument of Elizabeth Pusser, who was also the daughter of Anson and Susan Hancock. She died at the age of 18 years, and her infant daughter died at the same time. Both are buried here. Anson Hancock was a man of great integrity. He also was a trustee of the courts. In years back in the 1800s, women could not own property. So when a man died, his wife and children were treated equal. In other words, the woman received a child's share rather than the entire estate. Anson was a friend of the court and also a friend of the person. He represented many a person and helped settle the estate of many a woman in Apalachicola. This is a monument to George Pusser. He was in the Confederate Army and was killed in Virginia. This is just a memorial. He was the husband of Elizabeth Pusser, his wife and daughter, who we just got through talking about. The fact that Anson Hancock lived to be 65 years old is quite a record. In those days, most persons rarely got beyond the age of 50. Occasionally someone made it, but in 1865, that was quite a feat to live for 65 years. This is the grave of Frank Messina, a native of Trapani, Sicily. He came to Apalachicola in the very early 1800s and ran a freighter up the eastern seaboard as far as Boston. The name of his boat was the Cartesia. He married and raised a family, many children. He had a brother named Antonio, which we will get to later. And today, there are 5th generations of kinship still living in Apalachicola. These are the graves of Victoria and Dominic Continetti. Dominic came from Austria, and Victoria came from Palermo, Sicily. He was a bar pilot on the bay and the river, and in those days, to belong to the Bar Pilots Association, you had to be very good, and it was quite an elite organization that not just anybody could get into. But Dominic supposedly was one of the very best bar pilots. When a boat came into the harbor, the bar pilot went out and guided the boat in. He received a fee, and all the members of the association shared in the fee. That's why they were such an elite organization and made good money, as well represented by these tombstones. Dominic lived to be 85 years old, which in those days was quite a great feat. We talked about Anson Hancock being 65, but this man lived to be 85. A few minutes ago, we talked about Frank Messina. This is the grave of Antonio Messina. He was a brother to Frank. Antonio married and had 3 daughters, Fina, Nina, and Mamie. Mamie married Antonio Cicerone, and they raised a large family. Today we have the 5th generation of the Cicerones still living in Apalachicola. We've talked about this monument before. It's one of the largest Woodman of the World monuments in the graveyard. This belongs to the Reverend George Core, whom we have found was a Methodist minister, and his grandson, George Core, lives in Port St. Joe today and was clerk of the court in Gulf County for some 30-odd years. The Reverend George Core opened the first Methodist church in Sopchoppy and dedicated it, and also another Methodist church near the town of Quincy. My friend George Core in Port St. Joe gave me this information, and he was with his grandfather at both church dedications. We are now in the family plot of the Hull family. The Hull family had 4 boys. 2 of the boys served in the Union Army, and 2 of the boys served in the Confederate Army. They're all buried here in this graveyard. This one is R.R. Hull and L.R. Hull, who were in the Union Army, and this one is R.R. Hull and L.N. Hull, who served in the Confederate Army. This is their mother, Frances Hull, and she was buried here in 1914. It is a rare thing to have 4 sons in service at one time and lose them all. One thing I've discovered as we go through the graveyard on tour is how many graves are unmarked, and we have no way of knowing who is there. If you'll notice, this one appears to be a grave, the cement topping and the hole where it's caved in, and we have no way of knowing who this person is or how long ago they were buried. These are the graves of George Frederick Weefin and Estelle Marks Weefing. This is the grave of Elizabeth Josephine Hatch, who was the mother of George Frederick Weefin. Mrs. Hatch and her husband, Captain Hatch, lived on St. Vincent's Island, and he owned St. Vincent's Island. The Weefings inherited it from Captain Hatch, and they sold it to the Loomises from New York. It remained a private island for years until the government bought it and made it a federal preserve. You can only get to St. Vincent's by boat, but it has been a well-preserved island, and we are very proud of it. This is a monument to Charles Glazier. He was blown up in the ice plant in Apalachicola in 1877. The ice plant stood at the foot of Avenue D, next to the city dock. It was rebuilt, and it became the Whiteside Ice Plant, which was an old family of Apalachicola. Frank Whiteside inherited the ice house but did not keep it. And it went out of business, and then down the road, another ice plant opened up as the Apalachicola Ice Company. This is the grave of Mary McKnight. We don't know a lot about the McKnights, but the unusual thing about this grave plot is the coping. Most every coping in this graveyard is made of cement, but this one is made of brick. This is an example of an unknown grave. We have many in our cemetery, and we have no idea who's here or what families may have come from. We're trying to get money from the government to restore our graveyard and to see if we cannot find who these people are and be sure that they are remembered. This is an example of an abandoned grave. in memory of James Kellop. We have no way of knowing who he was or anything about him because he died in 1852. This monument was erected by his friend William Marr, whom we know nothing about. If we could get a grant to restore this cemetery, these abandoned graves would be put back and those people would have a final resting place. This is a monument to Leander Miller Crawford. He was blown up on the steamboat, the John O'Callaghan, and the steamship company erected this in his memory. This concludes part 3 of our tour of the Chestnut Street Cemetery in historic downtown Apalachicola. I hope you enjoyed your visit. I'm Dolores Roux, and thanks for watching.